Welcome to the Garden of Edun. Dami be asking the questions for the answers that you want to hear. All you gotta do is sit back, grab a chair, or listen up while you clean and cook. Take a leaf from the creative's book. These gems open your mind and your heart. Okay, the show's gonna start. Cheese! Welcome back to the Garden of Edun, where ideas grow. I'm your host, Dami Edun, and today we have a different type of episode as we welcome my friend Tom Grant to the podcast. Tom, welcome, bro. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm all good, man. How are you?
Yeah, bro. All good, man. All blessed. I mean, still breathing, still
good.
Got my health, so yeah. Can't
No
complain, man. Yeah.
Good man.
So Tom is a solicitor at Fletcher Sports Law, mainly managing professional athletes such as footballers, boxers, professional darts players, and also creatives and social media influencers, especially a particular show that's popping right about now. If you didn't know, if you didn't watch the last few weeks, Casa Amor, Toby, then you're missing out, man.
Do you know what? I'll confess to you right now. I've not watched this season. This is the first year I've not watched it. I know it's so bad. It's so bad. Anyway. This is the first year. Well, do you know what? I get so much off Twitter. I can pretty much read between the lines anyway that I haven't watched the ad break. Yeah. So I reckon I probably saved 60 hours by not watching it. But yeah, I believe it is going off.
Yeah, it's been like I've been dipping in and out here and there. It's got interesting though. There's a few characters that I'm just finding hilarious, man. Just the way they move through the world. I'm just like, really? But you know what? I also have to rate it because they're just going on TV like, yep, this is me, you know?
Well, I think that's the best way to do it. Like everyone that I can think back historically who's done well on that show has just been themselves and they've just done well. They've not tried to pretend to be anything they're not. And when you look at the winners, all the winners previously that I can think of have just been completely natural. And the public, I think, can tell that. The public aren't stupid when it comes to working out who's legit and who isn't. But yeah, there you go. That's your first exclusive 2 minutes in. I've not watched any of it this year. I think I watched the first 2 episodes. Shocking.
Oh man, it's all right. I can forgive you because I guess, especially the early stages, man, I was like, this ain't looking
get through it, you're okay.
Yeah. But yeah, just to give everyone some context, Tom and I used to play football together at uni in Nottingham back in the day. It's crazy how quickly that time just came and went, right?
I know, 100%.
Crazy.
I was thinking about that the other day, actually. I was saying before, I think I came on the pod, I was thinking about the last time I think I played against you and you came through the back of me and I've still got a lump on the back of my head from when you clattered into me. In fact, I think it might still be there now I think come to think of it. But Jeez. Yeah, no, they were good days, man. They were really good days. And yeah, they've gone far too quickly and they seem so long ago. They seem so long ago. But I think so much has happened in a short space of time. That's probably why.
Yeah, but hey, you know, look at us now. We're grown men doing podcasts, 100%. Working in law, like working with big profile people. Like we done all right, I guess.
Yeah, we're doing okay. We're surviving.
And just coming on to that as well, Tom. Like I noticed it might have been a year or 2 ago on Instagram. I noticed like people, you know, people from Love Island. I think maybe. Like Amber, shout out to Amber if she watches this. Shout out to you, Amber. You're just a G. Let me just say that.
She is a G.
People from Love Island, like on your following your account and commenting on your profile, and I was like, wait, what's going on here, Tom? What's happening? So
you think of the late charge for the show? Late charge for my own entry.
I was thinking, if this guy ends up on the show, this is gonna be crazy.
Could you imagine? I'd get bounced out of there so quickly.
But yeah, after doing a bit of digging, I realized that you know, your actual profession was related to working with people within this industry. And what I find quite interesting about that, mainly because, I do this podcast for people who are creatives, including, social media influencers, and there generally tends to be a focus on becoming the person at the center, the personal brand, and becoming that person, and becoming, the athlete, the musician, the influencer that's the center of everything that's going on. But people rarely ever, look at and aspire to be the person within the structure, but just in the background, doing the diligent work behind the scenes for those stars. So my first question for you today is, what drew you to work in this capacity when the seemingly more glamorous option is to go for being the center of the of the structure itself?
I think what you're asking me is, why didn't I just go on Love Island myself and make a fortune? Why did I go to the background? No, I think well, the Love Island stuff and the influencer stuff and the social media influencers that I look after, I fell into that really. So after I left Nottingham, I went into the law conversion and then did the LPC, which is like the year's vocation that you'd have to do if you went to the law degree anyway. And I knew I wanted to get into something sports related. I knew like I couldn't get out of bed unless I did something that had some element of sport in it. So I was applying for firms, for training contracts for firms that did sports law, like an element to it. And I got very, very lucky. So I met a friend of my boss's wife, who was basically saying, if you want to do sports law, you need to speak to this guy. He's the go-to. So long story short, I ended up meeting for coffee and he offered me some training, like work experience, and then it was a job, and then it was a training contract. And before I knew it, I was doing like really quite big hitting, like football legal work, hanging on to coattails of my boss. And underpinning all of that work was like obviously contractual elements that you had to sort of be aware of. And then, so that was probably the first like 18 months, but then fast forward to not the season of Love Island just gone, not the one before that. So do you remember it was like Josh Denzel, Megan Barton Hansen, Adam Collard, like Rosie Williams. So Rosie,
that was a great summer, by the way.
Yeah,
that was a great summer,
wasn't it? Yeah, 100%. So when that series came around, I'd actually done, so before you qualify as a solicitor, you have to do what's called a PSC course. So it's almost like the last little bit of exam training and like qualifications that you have to, like hoops you've got to jump through before you can qualify. And it's like business finance and all that sort of stuff, and regulatory issues and whatnot. And Rosie was on my course because she was training to be a solicitor at the same time. So we'd sort of been friendly for like the 2 weeks that we were on the course together, and we like chatted and stuff. And then we'd lost contact a little bit from like February. And then in June, or July, when the show was on, another girl that was on the course messaged me and said, "Have you seen who's turn on ITV2 now if you're not watching Love Island?" And I flicked it on, and Rosie's there like strutting into the villa. So I was like, this is mad. So I think a couple of days later, I rang her auntie, who's a barrister, and just said to her, like, if she comes out, she's going to get inundated with people wanting to manage her, and she's going to want, her contracts looking at and stuff. If you need any help, just give me a shout. Not really knowing exactly what I'd be doing, but having a rough idea of sort of what was going to get thrown her way. So anyway, sure enough, she came out of the villa, and then it was like an absolute feeding frenzy. There's like 12 or 13 agents trying to sign her, and all this sort of stuff going on. And I was just sort of there, like helping through the process, like just from a legal point of view, as a friend more than anything, just saying, well, this is what you need to be aware of, and try and dilute your management contracts. You've got a right to get out of it if it starts going wrong or whatever. And then from that point, to be honest with you, Dami, it's been like a snowball effect, because she would then say to the next person who came out off the show, "Oh, you need to speak to Tom before you speak to anybody else." So it was like someone just kicked the snowball down the hill, and it went crazy. And then fortuitously, the following series, the next year, which had Amber and all those guys, and it was probably even as big, if not bigger. The first lad that was out was a guy called Callum, who was a Welsh lad. And I think
Yeah.
he thought when he came out to ring the only the Welsh person who'd been on the show, which was Rosie. So I ended up doing stuff for Callum for the next series, and then everybody who came out of his series rang the first person who was out, which was him, and he did the same thing. So before you knew it, like inadvertently, it had gone from being just, advising me like a friend saying, "These things you need to be aware of," to just like 50 or 60% of the cast.
Yeah.
And then to be honest, from there, it's just mushroomed and just blown up, to be honest, ever since. And now it's got to a point where we don't advise the talents directly as such. We operate in a very similar way to we do with the football side of things, where we'll have the agencies that will look after, who obviously have a pool of talent where there's more issues on a day-to-day basis rather than just one person who might come to you with everything. You get the agency who comes to you with everything for 20 people. And that in of itself, like, we've got the big agencies in UK football or world football. It's the same with agencies here in the UK in terms of like media and influencer representation. And so, long story short, that's how it's all sort of come to a head. There's a lot of like nuances and different characters that come in along the way, but generally that's how it's all come about.
That's so crazy, man. You literally created a whole new lane for your company then, inadvertently.
A little, I mean, maybe a little bit. I think we were already, by nature, the football was always like commercial side of things anyway. So we were already doing bits and pieces like that with brands. But I think, to be honest with you, it was the timing more than anything. I think the social media marketing was really just coming to its peak around that time of that series, where it was like, Rosie and Megan and Josh and all those guys, and Georgia. That was when it was all like, I think, just at its absolute peak, and people started to associate Love Island not necessarily with people going on the show, but actually trying to make themselves money, which I don't necessarily think is the case, but that's the public perception. I think generally, as you go on that show, you're going to make money, not to find love. So I think it was more the timing more than anything. It was just fortuitous, to be honest.
It just synced up perfectly.
Yeah,
wow.
I think so. I think so, yeah.
I guess that really shows the strength of like word of mouth, really, because if 100%. You're able to do a good job for within any field or any lane that you're in, and that person just so happens to tell everyone else, and then suddenly you just got everyone knocking on your door. That's 100%. That's pretty incredible.
Without being self-serving, and my boss isn't going to watch this because he's not going to watch this. He's just not like tech savvy. Like, he won't sit down and listen to a podcast or anything like that. But without being self-serving in the slightest, I think that's something that I learned from him directly, because like I say, he's never really done any, certainly in the time I've been with him, BD. He doesn't go to meetings and like seek out business, but he's like one of the busiest people that I know. And the only reason is literally because of word of mouth reputation. And that's followed him around. Like, I don't know of anybody within the football sector who's got a bad word to say about him. And even people that I come across who don't know what it is that, or who it is that I work for, will volunteer like pleasantries, because that sort of word of mouth reputation. And it is so important to make sure that, especially, I think in any field it's really important, but especially within law, to treat people as straight as you possibly can, and hopefully that then you get the benefits later down the line.
Yeah, like, I guess like good business karma, just good karma in general.
100%. I'm a big believer that if you try and screw people over, it'll bite you back in the backside eventually anyway. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So I think that's massively helped, just trying to shoot straight with people, and then also helping people who don't really know. Like, it's such a circus, especially that show in particular, when you come off that show, it's such a circus. Like, the amount of stuff you've got going on, agents trying to sign you, you've got brands throwing tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds at you. You've come from, you've got the mental health element where you go in on day one, you could be there for 2.5, 3 months, not speaking to anybody. Don't forget, you're in a holding villa as well, like a week before it starts. So you're in there for a long period of time. Wow. You've not spoke to your family, you've not spoke to your friends. You've gone in like as a lash technician from Essex, and you come out with like 3 million followers. Like, there's so much stuff that goes on, and the last thing that you think of is, how do I earn my money effectively? How do I make sure I don't get screwed over? So I think in some ways it's a little bit fortuitous that you're there as like to make sure like that looked over and looked after.
Yeah. How would
Yeah,
you? Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, Tom. Because I want to ask you, how would you advise then? Because obviously, Love Island is a particular beast in terms of the the leverage that you can get in such a short space of time. But then we also have, people who are just creatives in general and using their own platforms, and for whatever reason, they go viral. I'm sure maybe you've seen like people on TikTok who one day have like 1 follower and then the next have like 2 million because of how active that platform is. So how would you advise people who end up in a situation like that, where they've suddenly come into a situation where agents and everyone and brands and everyone's trying to hit them up to do work with them? From what you've seen with the amount of people that you've worked with, how would you advise them to navigate that happening?
Well, without talking myself into work, go and get a lawyer. I don't care if it's me. Just go and get. I genuinely don't. As I say this to a lot of them as well when I speak to them. I won't be offended if they go and speak to their family friend who's a lawyer or whatever. But go and speak to a lawyer first, because when you're signing to an agency for management, you sign in usually for 12 months, and that 12-month period, you might not know it or might not realize it, but that might be your sort of peak earning potential period. So don't be signing your life away to somebody who might not know what they're doing, or might down tools after 3 months because they signed the next hot property, or somebody who won't earn your money like properly for you and won't look at your contracts properly. Well, I'm not saying that all agencies are like this. There's some very, very good agents, but there's also some that don't have a clue what they're doing. I only act for the ones that do know what they're doing, obviously. But that'd be the first thing I'd say. Just go and get a lawyer, and it wouldn't cost them the earth to get somebody to pay somebody a couple of £100 an hour to make sure that their affairs are completely in order and that they've got legal protection to get out of contracts if things start going wrong. And then depending on how much money they're looking at earning, go and get an accountant, go and get a financial advisor, go and get a team of professional people around you. If you're going to be taking your career seriously as a social media influencer, then take yourself seriously and go and get proper people around you to advise you properly. Because I've seen and I've heard absolute horror stories where those things haven't happened, and people are getting slapped for tax demands because they've been pulling money out of the companies left, right, and centre, or they've ended up in litigation with brands over unpaid fees, or because they've not done the job properly, or they're being sued by. It's just and all of a sudden those things tend to come on top when the money's maybe dried up a little bit, and all of a sudden you are thinking about where's my next paycheck going to come from. So whether you're a superstar off the back of a show like Love Island, or somebody who's organically gone from like 10,000 followers on TikTok or Instagram to like 100,000 or 300,000 overnight, like sit down and really think like, how am I going to structure my next 12 months? Like, how am I going to earn? Like, what's my average earnings going to be? Make sure that I'm sensible with my money, because I do believe that a lot of the financial and mental health issues are like entwined. You come off shows or you have a month or 2 months where you think, I'm making 15, 20, 50 grand a month, and this is never going to stop. I'm going to go and get a Range Rover on finance and go and get a 35-year mortgage if I can. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, that might not be there anymore, and you're staring down the barrel of quite a large financial liability. So, which is stressful for anybody, no matter what you do. So they're probably the most important things to do, to be honest with you. And before you go signing endorsement deals with people, just get them read through, because there's little things as well. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the first closing deals that I did for somebody who came off Love Island was with a big fashion company. And it was a lot of money. It was like a life-changing amount of money. The contract came through and there's no VAT on it. So straight away, if we hadn't looked at it, if you just signed the first thing that's put in front of them, it'd probably cost them a lot of. I won't give you the figure because one, I can't remember, and two, I'll probably get the percentage wrong. But there was a lot of VAT that would have been payable, for example, by this talent, rather than it being paid by the company. And all of a sudden, it's massively wiping out a lot of the money they could have earned. So Little things like
Yeah.
that, but they might not necessarily
Jesus.
think it through.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, to be honest with you, no matter what your level is.
Yeah, that VAT thing, because I actually worked in tax for a period. In my past life, I
Oh
worked
yeah, in your previous
in
life.
yeah, I worked in tax for a bit, actually, VAT. And yeah, that VAT slap when it comes and you've spent all that money, like,
hmm
because even though I was working with companies and businesses, that was something as well. They get a big windfall over a period of
hmm
months and then have spent it on wages or invested in a company or whatever it
hmm
is, and then HMRC comes knocking like,
hmm
hey,
Where's my
we
VAT?
want 20% of all of that that's
Yeah,
come in.
yeah,
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 that's a big one. Um,
yeah.
yeah, that's huge, man. What other things would you say people should look out for in like if they are doing like a sponsorship deal or like a brand deal, and it might even be someone who's like a micro or like medium level influencer who maybe feels like they can't afford to get professional services and may want to look at it themselves and manage more of those more of those processes themselves. What kind of things would you advise for them to look at when when looking at their contracts on first hand? Like,
Well, I mean, it depends on who they are, how they're earning their money. If they got a company, are they doing it themselves? What sort of level they're at. But all the main things that you'd look at would be contracting parties. Like, is it going to be them personally? Is it going to be their company?
mm,
Is there VAT payable on the fees? When are the fees going to get paid? Is it going to be upon delivery of content? Is it going to be on signature? Is it going to be half and half? Um,
mm,
there's a few sort of legal points that you're throwing at the back in terms of liability and limiting the liabilities in case anything goes wrong, so that you're not getting sued for crazy amounts of money if they're in a personal capacity and whatnot. But they're probably the ones that I would always be drawn to straight away as a lawyer, like trying to be risk averse, trying to minimize any kickback. But it really just depends on who the client is and what the document's saying. My gripe with PR firms all the time, some are brilliant and some do their contracts like on the back of a fag packet and then throw them over to the lawyers for the other side to look at. And some of them I just tear my hair out and think, I was saying to my colleague today, actually we had another one today, saying to him, how can this get issued to somebody? I'd be embarrassed. It doesn't even look like a contract. I'd be embarrassed. But I
yeah.
know that obviously some of these PR agencies, that's not their bag. Their bag is going out, getting the brands in, getting all the PR pies together, bashing them all together, and off they go, which is great until there's a fallout and everyone has to go and dig the contract out and work out what on earth they meant by X, Y, or
Right.
Z, because it reads so terribly, or it's not got, boilerplate provisions in which are, how, whether it's going to be English law that governs the contract and whether it's, little things that just go for the benefit of everybody. They're not contentious issues. They're just, if there's something goes wrong with this contract, how is it going to be dealt with? And a lot of the contracts that we see haven't got this stuff in yet. And I do think like the social media influencer sector, if you like, has got an awful lot of catching up to do when it comes to the contracts. Because when you look at other, the stuff that's presented to the footballers and the athletes, they tend to be a lot more finesse. Maybe that's because sometimes they come from the brands directly rather than from PR agencies or third parties. But they tend to be like serious documents for serious people, and we just I do feel that there's a little bit lacking from PR agencies, not all but
Right.
some, in terms of just like how thorough their documents are, which in some ways is great because when I get them, it means it's going to take 4 hours longer than it has to, and I can charge for it to put it together. But I'd
Yeah.
rather not. I'd rather be, believe it or not, as cost effective as possible for everybody, and not
Yeah.
spend having a Mr. Bean moment with the cocktail sticks reading through contracts. But
Yeah.
sometimes that's just what's needed in order to get things done.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. That's really interesting though, man. I definitely feel like if somebody, because even at maybe not at that Love Island status level, but at lower levels where I know people who are signed to agencies, even like people who are maybe actors or in other kind of fields where they sign to an agency, and in some cases just trusting what's on the
Yeah,
document
put in front of them. Yeah,
instead of really dissecting it or going
yeah.
to the professionals who know exactly what they're doing. It actually reminds me of a story of one of my friends. Actually, he's an actor, but this happened a while ago. So he was cast for an advertisement with fuck it, I'm gonna say their name, Centerpoint, the
Oh
homeless
yeah.
charity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he went to this casting, it was essentially him having to play the role of someone who was homeless, and uh, they were going to be using it for an advertising campaign. And if I'm not wrong, they offered him either a percentage based on how much like it would be put out to the
Mm-hmm.
UK, or something of that ilk, or a flat fee of like £200. So
Mm-hmm.
he went with the £200, and they told him like this is going to be quite a small local campaign, blah 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 blah. He signs the deal, does the content for them. This guy ends up everywhere. Like
Oh no.
it was so bad to the point where I would be illegally streaming. I shouldn't really say that, but fuck it. I was illegally streaming TV at uni.
Yeah,
And you know when the
yeah,
pop-ups come up where you have to
yeah,
click them
yeah,
off
yeah.
to watch the
It's your
film?
homeless mate.
It's my guy
Oh
on the
no,
picture. And there'd
no.
be times that we'd get on the tube and he's just there on the banner, like literally for maybe 2 years, he was
Oh my god.
everywhere. And I'm sure, if
But that must have affected his other work though, because if he's then seen like if he's then seen it, or say he's going for like a I don't know Hollywood movie 2 months later, it's actually well you're on the side of a bus representing homeless people. It's not really the
yeah,
portrayal that we want for this role. That must affect his future work. And you think for the sake of just getting something looked at, it doesn't have to be by a lawyer, just somebody other than you sometimes, just to read through something. If you're
yeah,
that engrossed in getting the job or whatever, sometimes that is just enough to read through it. But yeah, I mean, listen, it happens in every industry. And whenever I get people coming to me like really being very self-critical because they feel stupid because they've signed something that they now look back and think, oh my god, what was I doing? I try to say to them, don't. It's not that deep. Don't get too upset about it. It's done now. Like you're at the right place now. We can try and deal with it. Rather than just really putting the boot in yourself, which is going to benefit nothing really.
yeah,
But yeah, it's tough. Like it happens in every sector. Football, you get young players signing things they have no idea what they're signing, and
yeah.
people when they come off Love Island signing things they have no idea what they're signing, and then 12 months later they'll come to me and say they've fallen out with their agent. Can you get them out of a contract? And it's a stupidly long period of time. But it's
Mm,
difficult. If your friend there that you just give an example of, he might not have £200, £400, whatever it is, to pay to a lawyer
yeah,
to look for a contract that's worth only 200 quid to him. There was no sense in that. So,
yeah,
I mean, we always try to do stuff like on a cost-effective basis. So if someone came to me, they're prospected to be a huge star in like 5 years' time, I'll do my best to try and help them out now, so that when the big deals come along, you might think, oh, actually, I'll come back to Tom and see if he can help us out.
mm,
But obviously, the busier I get, the harder it is to still dedicate the time to do those things. But I try.
yeah, yeah. That's definitely understood. I mean, for my guy there, he's not in the field anymore.
I bet he's
I don't think
not.
that.
I bet he thinks I've been burnt from that one, so I'm gonna go do another job.
Oh God, I do need to ask him how it affected him mentally, because we laughed and joked about at the time, but I didn't ask
Yeah.
him, bro, how was that actually? How did I actually feel?
Poor
Maybe
guy.
maybe I'll bring him on the pod one time, talk to him about it. Um, but yeah, with with the field you're in now, and I guess you said that you didn't intend to necessarily work in the space with, including like social media influencers, but with I guess like the creative industry, sports industry, tied into law. How competitive would you say it would be now, like at this point in time? Because there might be somebody who's listening thinking that they actually would rather go a professional route and then work within the industry in that way. How competitive would you say it is, let's just say in law, for example, versus a more common path like corporate or criminal law? How would you rate it?
It's mega competitive. It was mega competitive when I was trying to get into it, that's for sure. And I got very, very lucky. Like, believe me, I reckon I must have spent 350 hours like doing the training contract applications, you know, for like the equivalent of like grad like entry level jobs, to firms like from high street all the way through to like, you know, massive firms. And I got through to interview in a few of them, but generally I didn't really get that far, and it was just fortuitous that how my job came about, really. But yeah, I think not the problem so much, but football law and like media entertainment law is seen as like the sexy side of law, which it is in some degree, and in others it's just like, you know, it's like contractual law within a context of media entertainment and football, for example.
Right.
But I think, you know, the law in general is a bit of a nightmare to try and get into in the field. Like, there was some stat that I got battered around the head with when I was trying to get into it. It was like 1,700 applicants for training contracts in 17,000 live training contracts registered in 1 year for like 250,000 law graduates. So instantly the odds are stacked against you anyway. And that's from like, you know, really small high street firms, like the big firms. And then obviously the discrepancy in money when you come out is huge. And the smaller firms can't necessarily pay huge amounts of money that could be in the first 3 or 4 years that you're working. Actually, all you're doing is just paying off your debts from doing the postgraduate stuff and the law conversions and what have you. So it's so tough. But I think, like, my sister's a couple of years younger than me. She went to Nottingham as well. You know, she's working in London and doing well for herself now. But when she first came out of university, she really struggled to find a job as well. You know, she's got a 2-1 history from Nottingham. You'd think that would be a decent starting point to get into most places and get into entry, but it's not. And I don't think it matters what you do, to be honest with you. It's so tough. It seems to be so tough to find a job and to get a job. But yeah, in terms of like people that write to me and say, "Oh, can you help us get work experience, or can you, you know, help us, like, give us advice?" I always try my absolute utmost to give that time, because when I was like 16, 17, 18, and then while I was at uni as well, like, I was bombarding people for work experience, like left, right, and center. And some people that just told me to piss off and think of me the time of day, and you sort of keep a little mental note of who those people are. And,
have you ever crossed paths with any of them?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, I've crossed paths with quite a few of them. In fact, I had a matter recently where we were doing a manager's contract. He was going into a Premier League club, and the lawyer on the other side was the lawyer who rejected me in an interview for a firm like not too far away. And I remember just thinking, like, she obviously wouldn't have a clue, probably wouldn't even put two and two together, but there was a real moment of satisfaction where it's like, she's at this level and I'm like at this level, but for this 1 hour we're both here just negotiating a contract. And it was only 5 years ago she's basically telling me that she's going to hire somebody else. So that feeling is nice. But yeah, like, I wrote to so many people asking for work experience, and some people were like very, very generous at the time. You know, if they couldn't give me work experience, or they couldn't, you know, meet for a coffee, they'll speak for 15, 20 minutes on the phone. So even if I can't get to meet people, or we can't get people into the office, which has been difficult because of COVID and stuff.
Yeah,
I have tried to like get like 15, 20 minutes on the phone with people. Like, there's a guy called Maurice Watkins who is like seen as the godfather of sports law. Like, he was on the board at United. Remember when Cantona did the kung fu kick at Palace? Oh shit,
yeah.
So Morris like represented Cantona in that sort of case, and he did all the legal stuff for United, and had a huge like sports law career. So I was quite fortunate that I was able to like ring him and lean on him and get advice from him, not just when I was like asking for work experience, but even all the way through till recently. Like if I have a problem at work, which, you know, I can't speak to my boss about, which is very few and far between, to be honest with you, but, you know, I'd be able to lean on people like that. So, yeah, like I was quite lucky to have like a good little network of people that I could lean on, to be honest with you. But yeah, like going back to your question, it's really tough, really tough to get into.
Yeah. And so I guess kind of summarizing, your advice would be to just try and talk to as many people in that 100%. Space of law as possible.
100%. Don't be scared. Like I think back as well. Like I went to, for my birthday. So I was working this paralegal job in Manchester when I was at law school for my second year, and I was doing human rights law, and I hated it. It was just horrific. I really didn't like it. So I took annual leave from that job to go to an event called Law in Sport on my birthday. So it was down in London. It was at Twickenham. And I sort of turned up and it was funny actually, because when you had to apply for the tickets, it was like £150 for a student ticket. So I was like, oh, sod it, right, I'll go down, I'll bring a friend, see if I can stay with her while I'm down in London and stuff. And it's not too far from, she was in Kingston, not too far from Twickenham. And I'll turn up and I'll just wear the badge, wear the suit, and just go and ask loads of questions and just sit and listen to all these talks that are happening with like all these big names within sports law, and particularly football law. And it was so good. But when they published the brochure, I think I hadn't filled in the form correctly. So they had me down as being like a delegate for the event rather than a student. So I think my name, like Thomas Rawson Grant, my full like Christian name, was just between Tottenham Hotspur and the English Rugby Football Union as like attending parties. And then it was like all these other law firms and stuff like that. And I was like, I do not belong on this list. Like, and I certainly don't belong between those two entities. Because obviously people are looking around ahead of these conferences, like, oh, who's going to be there? And they must have seen like Thomas Rawson Grant and thought it was like a triple-barreled law firm name that was attending. Yeah. In reality, it was just me, like a student who had no idea what was going on.
Did anything come off that? Did anything come off the back of that?
Oh yeah, it was brilliant. So when I went to that event, it was class. So there was like coffee breaks in between. And if honestly, any budding sports lawyer who wants to know more about what's happening, like day-to-day in the industry, look out for one of those events because it's well worth going to. And you get in for practically nothing. If I was to go now, it's like a small fortune to get in, but again, still worth it. But as a student, it's nothing. But I would go to that and just like the coffee breaks and stuff, I would just go up to everybody and just ask like a load of questions, like just how did you get here? What you're doing? Like, how did you get into the industry? What advice would you give me? Just to the point, it's probably a bit of a nuisance, to be honest with you. But and people were asking me questions about what do you think about that last presentation, and I'd be like, I have no idea. I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounded interesting. I'm trying to work out what was going on. But off the back of that, so there was a guy there called Vijay Parbat, who was head of legal at UK Sport at the time. Who UK Sport are responsible for all the funding for like Olympic and Paralympic like events and stuff. Right. So I remember going to him at the end of it, and he literally just spoken on stage, and I went to him for like 2 minutes and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry to bother you. You know, I've done a little bit in private practice where I've like shadowed somebody who's at a private law firm, but I know you're publicly funded. Can I come to London and like work with you for a week and just see what it's like, just working in a public law funded like law office basically?" And it was literally like, "Here's my card. Like, if you ring me and you know we'll sort something out." So off the back of that was in the February. I did 2 weeks work experience there in July, and then at UK Sports I came on to London for that. And like that was class. It was such a good experience. And fortuitously, again, when I say about people who gave me their time when really I was nothing to them, was a lady called Jane Purden who just finished being director of the Premier League for like 20 years. She'd been there for a long time and seen its growth to the point where it is now. She just left at the time I went to UK Sport, she literally just left the Premier League and gone to UK Sport as like one of the governance like officers for a few of the Olympic and Paralympic sports. So we'd go out for lunch and she'd like talk to me about the industry and her experience getting into sports law and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it was just so beneficial going to that one decision to go, right, I'm going to go down to London, I'm going to try this event, I'm going to just throw myself out in the deep end. So much then led from that.
Yeah.
And like, I felt like I'm a complete fish out of water. I felt like a complete idiot at some of the questions that I was asking and people were asking of me, but just try and like finesse it as best you possibly can, and hope that you come out not looking too stupid. And
Yeah.
you got to put yourself out there, haven't you? Otherwise, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah. I mean, here you are, bro. You were taking those actions regularly, and it led you down the path of, you said, meeting your boss's wife's friend, was it?
Yeah. So that was a bit. So I was with my mates in Abersock on holiday one summer. I just finished my law conversion, and I was about to start. This was the stupid. I think back now, I was like, what was I doing? Because a lot of people that I was at law school with already had training contracts. They were like guaranteed employment the second that they finish law school. I didn't have any of that. So I was like just doing paralegal work in this human rights firm in Manchester just to basically pay my way through law school. And I really didn't like it. But yeah, we were in a bar in Abersock, and there was like a big group of like women like all chatting and stuff. And one of my friends, who will remain nameless, went over there and was like, "Oh, have you got a cigarette?" And I was like, I know for a fact you don't smoke. And I know for a fact you shouldn't be speaking to them. Anyway, long story short, we all sort of like mingled and had a really nice evening, just chatting or whatever. And this lady was saying, "Oh, what school did you go to? What do you want to do?" And all this sort of stuff. And sort of explained to her, and she was sort of saying, "Well, if you want to go and do sports law, you've got to speak to Fletch. Like, if you don't know who Fletch is, then you don't know anything about sports law." And I was sort of sat there feeling like pretty stupid. And anyway, she was like, "Well, put your number here." And if she gave me a number, she said, "If you text me tomorrow, and if I remember you, because everyone was a bit drunk at this point, I'll get in touch with Fletch, who's like friends with my husband at the next family barbecue we have, and I'll get him to give you a message." So anyway, I did. This was like August. So I messaged her the following day, "Hi, hope your head's not too sore. Lovely to meet you. If it's not too much trouble, if you put me in touch with Fletch, and I really appreciate it." And then I didn't hear anything for like a month. And in the meantime, I volunteered at another event called Soccer X, which is like law in sport, but it's like football business. And that was like no students allowed. You might have seen it, but I was like, no students allowed. It was like £1,500 a delegate ticket, and I was like, "There's no way I'm affording to get into this without getting a ladder and scaling the fence." So I took annual leave again from that paralegal job that I hated, and I volunteered at the event. I was like, I know it's a bit, because it was at Manchester GMEX as well. So I was like, I'll volunteer again. Like, I'll show people to toilets and stuff. I'll do it if you need to do. Just let me in there.
Love that.
So yeah, so it was quite lucky. So because at first he said, "Oh no, you can't. Like, we're full. We've got enough." Because I think they did something in Manchester Met Uni. We'll let the kids that we've already got do the volunteering. Was sort of good. And then a couple of days before the event, like, actually, if you still want to do it, you can come and do it. So I was like, "Yeah, 100%, I'll be there." So I turned up like 3-piece suit, looking like the absolute business. And then they were like, "Yeah, here's your high-vis jacket, pal. Like, go and stand by the toilets and take coats." So in the meantime, it was like mad. It was like Michael Owen turning up, Guys Comendieta. It was just
big names.
I'd gone huge names like Luis Boamorte, like all these guys who played Premier League for years and years. Were now turning up to this event. In fact, I'd been to New York, so I literally just got back from New York, where I took my dad's a massive tennis nut, and it was his 60th. So I took him to New York, and then we just landed, and I got this text message. We landed like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I got a text message saying, "If you still want to come and volunteer, you can do, but you need to be at the Granada Studios where they film Coronation Street for like 9 o'clock on the Sunday morning." That morning, so I literally went home, slept for 2 hours, went straight to there, because they did a football festival on the Sunday for like all the local kids and stuff, the day before the actual business event started on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Right.
So I was dead on my feet. I thought, no, I've got to go, because it'll be worth it. And you can't just turn up for the business bit, otherwise they'll know that I'm just only in it for the connections and not in it to actually help out.
Yeah.
So it was class. Like the actual day before, they had like classic football shirts there at this event. Now, who are now massive, but that was like when they were just starting out. So they had all these footballers doing the tournament. They had like Sean Garnier doing the freestyle stuff, and they had Andy Tate off, the United fanzine guy, like Moise. He was,
Yeah.
so it was, I was knackered, but it was so good. But yeah, anyway, on the Monday, it was like, here's your high vis jacket, here's your suit. Anyway, once I'd got in there, high vis went away. I took the name badge off and I just went round, same as at Law and Sport, really, just chatting to
Mm,
everybody. And at that event, I got a phone call from from Paul Fletcher, who's now my boss, saying, I'm really busy this week. I can't meet you for a coffee. Can we push it off next week? He's like, I'm actually, I'm at an event this week. And I was like, what event is it? He was like, oh, it's Soccer X. I was like, don't worry, I'm there as well. I'll see you there.
ooh.
I was like, this is just far too fortuitous. So then off the back of that, he was like, well, you've clearly managed to like wriggle your way in here somehow. So we'll try and arrange some work experience. And then between that September and the January, just through communication, he was like, look, I can't give you work experience, but I actually got a need for like a paralegal 2 days a week just to help pick up the slack on stuff. Can you just come and help me out? And then from there it went, well, I'll paralegal 2 days a week for you, to then when I wasn't at law school, it went to 5 days a week. And then the day I finished my last law school exam, he was like, look, we've got enough work and enough variety to give you a training contract. Do you want to and that's how it came about.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a mad circumstance as to how it all came about, and there was quite a lot of luck in there in terms of being right place, right time. But there was also quite a lot of like trying to go out and trying to make it happen, because it was like that. It was demoralizing, the amount of applications that you send off, you don't hear back, you get rejected for like no reason. They just say thank you, but no thank you. I worked out, it was probably about 350 hours over the course of 6 to 8 months just doing applications. Jesus. So it all worked out okay in the end, but yeah, it was a lot of slog.
Yeah, it does really sound like it. But you know what's really sick about that story, and I think anyone can take away from it as well, is just you, even though there was a lot of luck, you took a lot of action, because a lot of people would have seen the initial 1,500 for Soccer X and been like, nah, I ain't going to that. Yeah. Like,
to
they would have just...
Googling step ladders. Like, how much can I get to 12-foot fence at this place at G-Max to just get in? To just jib it and get in. But I thought that would probably look even worse on the CCTV, just getting escorted out,
Yeah, go up the ladder and then try and network with everyone you've just broken into the place 100%. To see. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, but no, that's amazing. It's just mad how many opportunities you can take just by going just that little bit extra, just to get in front of those people that can. I guess you didn't even know who it was gonna be per se, but you just knew it was gonna bring opportunity in it, and it did. And I imagine as well, when you like with any other job, and when you join like a new industry, you start to learn things very like specific within that industry. So within sports law and like media entertainment law as well, as you started getting more of those clients on board, what are the different like nuances that you learn about just like that industry through your job, and anything just in general that you would share about that?
In terms of nuances, I don't think there's that many, in the sense that like what I do is like underpinned predominantly by contract.
Right.
So all those principles generally are the same, and whether I'm reviewing one because it needs amending because they want to sign a deal, or whether I'm reviewing one because somebody is getting sued or is about to be sued and we need to know how to handle it accordingly. There's not really that many nuances in terms of like how the industry operates. I don't know. It's a tricky one, because it's more just I've got a much better understanding now, certainly than I did 2 years ago or 3 years ago, of how the deals come to fruition, how it comes from, a marketing creative at a brand thinking this is how we want to get our product to market, to how it reaches a point where an influencer is the one that's responsible for delivering those goods and making sure that it's the most effective sort of launch of a product possible, and meeting all the requirements of the brand. So I've got a much better understanding of how that all works now. And that's something that I think you only get once you're sort of really in the eye of the tornado, and you get to see all the moving parts, whether it's, your agent, your PR agency, your talent, your account managers, whatever it might be. like you only really see the donkey work that goes into, you know, people just sit and scroll through their phones and then see like, oh, it's, you know, Obi's doing a Diet Coke advert. That's really cool. Yeah, but there's like so much work that's gone into just getting it to that point where you're watching on your phone now. That's probably the thing that I appreciate more now than I did maybe before I started getting into the industry. And the football side, I think football and boxing, it's just two mad worlds. Like anything and anything can happen, you know. So nothing would ever surprise me in either one of those two sectors, to be honest.
What's the craziest thing, just like going over to like football, what's the maddest thing that you are allowed to talk about that's happened that stalled the negotiation, or that you were just looking at like, this is just
do you know
insane?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I mean, in terms of stories that I've heard a very, very good one about lawyers getting dragged to like different cities. Like my boss got told to go to Paris once for a like transfer to take place, and when he got there, it was like, meet at this location. He gets to that location, it was like, right, actually, you're going to meet somebody to then take you to another location, to then go to another location, and it was all like very like smoke and mirrors. So I think there's quite a few like things like that have gone on. But in terms of stuff that I've actually been privy to, like I've been my first ever real big like football case, if you like, that went all the way through to a trial. Like there was stuff like that we were acting against the club, and the club was producing documents that were like clearly fake, like just so fake, and we all knew they were fake. Yeah, and we all knew they were fake. We worked it out because
oh shit.
But there was like, we worked it out by the dates of the players they'd put on the document weren't up to date. They were like the dates of the players as of like the day that we were in the trial. The date of birth was then, but not 3 years ago when this document should have also been produced. So there was like things like that then. So, but that was one of those moments was like, oh my God, like we're not playing against somebody we're not fighting against somebody who's playing by the rules. We're fighting against somebody who's, you know, going to be trying to be crafty to save himself some money, irrespective of the fact that basically it was, you know, they were lying. Like we caught them red-handed at it. So that was, as much as I'd love to, I can't name names on that one, but yeah, there's just some, that's just off the top of my head, like some of the crazy stuff that I've come across. I'm sure if I sat down and really thought about it, there's stuff that, you know, I could really let loose on. But I keep saying to my boss, you know, when he's come to the point where he doesn't want to do it anymore, his memoirs, the stuff that he could divulge would be a bestseller, like international bestseller, New York Times bestseller, like some of the stuff, some of the names, like just crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But you might have to wait for that one.
Yeah, it's always mad when like when managers or players, you know, when they write books and they say this is actually what was going on, and these are when you can call on so many names and say, yeah, you guys all think this person was a legend, but let me tell you what was going on behind closed doors. Yeah.
There's been a few times as well where I've been doing like managers' contracts, whether they're going in or coming out of a club, and I'll literally be like changing something in the contract or like amending it, and then I'll get like a notification on my phone, like Sky Sports News, like this person is now announced has been appointed as this manager, and I'll be sat there thinking, no, he's not, mate. We've still got the contract here. Like it's some way away.
Oh,
there's a few things like that happened where I'm just like, you know, and a few of my friends will like know like roughly what we do and like what we might have going on and stuff, and they'll be ringing up every 5 minutes like, asking for info and stuff, and just be like declining calls left, right, and centre. But yeah, like football and boxing are both just mad worlds. So and I think it's one of the reasons it's exciting, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so, especially like with football and the way there's so much movement within the game. Like there's so much movement of players and managers and stuff like within it, that it just that kind of activity just creates chaos, right? At some level, which means just mad things can happen. So I know you're a Man City fan, obviously. A
100%. Yeah.
big Man City fan from what I remember and from what
Yeah.
I see on social occasionally. Um,
Yeah.
how how does it feel for you on a level when you work with the club on things that are quite big that you
Yeah.
want to be excited about, but you know you have to kind of like work on it and also
Um,
keep that fan side at bay? What does that feel like?
to be honest with you, like in a bit of a sad way, I think my personal allegiances and professional sort of they really do depart. Like if
Mm,
God forbid we had to act against Man City for something, then it would be just business. I wouldn't feel any particular way about it. I suppose it'd be like if a player goes and plays against his childhood club or the club that he's supported growing up. They don't care. They just focus on the job they've got to do. I think that's the
mm,
only way you can really approach it. But we've had stuff where we've done stuff with clubs that we support in the past, and you just do it as professionally as you can. And to be honest with you, it's never really entered my mind about, oh, I'm doing this against the club or I'm doing this for the club or anything like that. It's never honestly entered my mind.
mm.
I think one thing that I was really conscious of, and I don't know if you noticed from like following on social media, but compared to when I was at university, compared to what I am now, I don't really comment on football as much anymore. I really like on
Yeah,
Twitter. I virtually don't use Twitter, and I had to do a cull based on my own social media like a couple of years ago because I'd slagged off a player on social media like for throwing elbows around. You could probably even guess who it was for throwing too many elbows around and basically not getting
yeah.
booked. And it went viral. It got like thousands. I got the engagements. It was like ridiculous amount of engagements. Like there's a good chance he's seen this. And a couple of months into working for my boss, one of the first things he asked me to do was review this guy's boot contract. And I was like, well, if he sees my name on an email and it's pretty much exactly the same as my social handle, then there's a good chance he could put two and two together. Whether he did or not, I don't know. But that made it sort
Yeah,
of prompted to me to go back and like, right, I need to literally go through wherever I've like berated, poor Ashley Young got it every single week, no matter whether he's playing for United or England. Like, fortunately, we've never done anything for him, but he got it every single week pretty much for every dive in or just any
yeah,
it could have been anything, but there was like a
yeah,
long list of players who got it, and all that had to stop pretty much straight away. Like just because
yeah,
you never know who you're going to act for in the future or when and the last thing you want is for them to just recognize you because you've absolutely blasted them on social media. so so all that's had to sort of get knocked on the head. But in terms of like allegiances to clubs and stuff like that,
mm,
we've put players, we've put players into United, for example, who I think are top class players. We advise players from all over the world coming into the country and going out. So yeah, even though like I'm not Manchester United's biggest fan, obviously,
yeah.
like if it, we would never, I'd never like we did, Wan-Bissaka's like one that we can speak about who's
Right.
published in Legal 500. When my boss and the firm like advised him going into United, obviously like I would have probably loved to have had him at City at some point, but we
Mm.
got Kyle Walker instead, and on the
I mean,
day,
on the balance
one's
of
doing
fame.
okay, one's doing okay, one's doing, they're both doing okay, but one's maybe doing slightly better. But there's
Yeah,
it just you don't it doesn't
yeah,
really enter your head to think, oh well, I'm a City fan and I don't want them to do well, I don't want that to happen. No,
yeah,
those days unfortunately have gone, I think.
yeah, yeah. I guess when you're working within the system of football itself, it's hard to have that because it's all when you support a club, it's almost like it's a unrealistic view, or I'm trying to find a word like it's a non-logical way of
Mm,
approaching it. Like, right,
mm,
I'm this club and
mm,
everyone else from this club, like I don't want
mm,
anything
mm.
to do with them. I hate everything. I would never try and make things happen. But when you go into the system, you kind of realize it's all a bit more connected and you kind of all
Yeah,
need each other within it. So you can't be as tribal with, your
yeah, yeah, yeah,
allegiances. So you have to,
yeah.
yeah, you have to
I think it
like
also gave me a
assuage
bigger
that.
appreciation of like what goes on behind the scenes at football clubs as well. Like and with particularly with the agents, and I know they get so much press, and not always, like, predominantly it's not good press, especially the agents. But again, like, the vast majority of the ones that we deal with are doing like a huge amount of work for their clients, and it's not always work they get paid for. You know, it's the stuff like it's the hard yards in terms of like looking after their family's interests, you know, making sure that, you know, everything in terms of the holistic, their lifestyles like managed properly. They do it, you know, they've got the nutritionist they sorted out, and they've got the holidays sorted out. This is stuff they don't get paid for. They do it as part of their management package when they offer it to their clients. And I think, you know, there's a massive like offering from, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes at football clubs and within football that you don't see as a fan, that you get a bit more of a glimpse into, like sat in the chair that we sit in. So yeah, so like, even, you know, when people go nuts at like team selections and stuff, like, you know, I could scratch my head at a few things that Pep's done over the last few years, particularly in finals and semi-finals. But you know, I don't lose sleep over it, because I think, well, I've not stood on the training ground for the last 2 weeks in the run up to the game and seen how everyone's played. But I'd have not spoken to the medical staff and know exactly if, you know, that guy is carrying a calf injury or not, whether he's recovered properly or whether he's, you know, there's so much that goes on. I feel like I'm a lot more, or a lot less passionate about, you know, the vitriol towards if anything goes wrong with City, for example, than I would have been 5-6 years ago, because there's just so much that goes on. It's like not worth losing sleep over. There's a very good reason why those guys get paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds a year to make decisions. It's because they are good at making those decisions, you know.
Yeah. I think once
not Joe Blogs in the pub.
Who's barely got his eyes on the TV while the match is
not
actually
even watching
on.
the telly. Exactly. Yeah. My dad's one of those guys. I swear to God. He'll just be on his phone and he'll look up every now and then and just go, shit, and just carry on back on his phone, man. Oh, it's so frustrating. I can't even need to tell you.
And then they're like, yeah, they should have done this, that, and the other. Why wasn't this person starting?
And then he'll ring his mates after the game with such conviction and be like, "He had such a terrible game." And I'll be like, "You didn't even watch more than 20 minutes of it, I swear to God." Anyway.
But yeah, I guess that's what happens when you get more of an understanding of what is going on behind the scenes. And also when you realize that at the end of the day, these guys are humans and they're doing a job. And sometimes when you're
100%.
working, you can't always get it 100% right. Sometimes it doesn't really go the way you want it. Sometimes it just, you have teething problems. It's normal. And then, I guess that, like I mentioned before, that like tribalism with it just reduces, because you realize it doesn't make sense to continue.
It's not worth losing sleep over with it, honestly. Like, it's just, I say it's only a game, like, it means a lot more to me than that, but you know, it's just not worth losing sleep over.
Yeah, most definitely, man. Most definitely. So one of the things that like I just find interesting about going back into like the creative field is people can sometimes find it difficult to transition from those things being their hobbies to making like a full-time level of income. So if you think of somebody who hasn't had that big moment that we talked about going on Love Island, or a point where their content goes viral and it's more of a slow transition and they start having those conversations. I know you mentioned earlier that when you were talking to the person who didn't hire you, you were in the room negotiating with them.
Yeah.
Which is a sick flip, by the way. Love that. For those creatives who aren't quite at that level where they can get somebody to negotiate on their behalf when they're talking to brands for advertisement or sponsorship deals, from the conversations you've been in where you've negotiated, what kind of things would you what would you advise those people to do to get the best out of the deals in general?
If they've not got a lawyer, they've not got someone to look at, or like an agent to look through the contracts.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it will come with their own experience. If they're not at a stage where they want to start, you know, paying for professional advice, or they've not got a management who's experienced who can go through these things, and it's like they're trying to do it themselves. Like, they'll in their own minds, they'll know what their price point is that they want to pitch themselves at. And that's really the biggest thing that they'll all be bothered about, is how they're going to make the money. So, but that comes through a little bit of trial and error. So they might sell themselves short on one job. They might get a bit more money than they were happy to accept on another job. They've just got to keep trying to push and ask the questions. And but if they were trying to do the deals themselves, it would literally be the most important thing. I know everyone says, "Oh, I'm not bothered about money." That's 100%. That's all they're focused on, is make sure they're getting paid the right amount for the amount of work they've got to deliver. So, you know, but that all depends on the job and the creative, and you know what they're happy, what point they're at in their life. Like, they might be quite happy taking £1,000 from Instagram post, but 2 months later they might want £2,000. They might want, you know, they'll know as their career progresses and the engagements that they get, they'll be able to plot like how popular they are and how popular the post has been and stuff. They'll be able to work out their place in the market and, you know, pitch themselves accordingly. If they've got an agent, that will help, because although they might have to give their agent 20%, in my experience, good agents are worth their weight in gold and then some, because not only will they bring in the work for them because they've got the contacts and the connections, but once the work comes in, even if the agent isn't always proactive and they just sit and they wait for the email inquiries to come in from people saying, "Oh, we'd love to sponsor your talent," or whatever, they might get that email inquiry. And I've heard of this as well. Like, some of my clients, like agency clients, are fabulous at this, and it baffles me sometimes how they manage to do it. They'll get an inquiry for like 10 grand and they'll turn it into a year-long deal for 250 grand over the space of like 3 or 4 emails. So, you know, sometimes even if you're like a creative and think, "I don't need an agent, I want to do it myself," like, maybe go and speak to a few and do a few trial and errors. Like, "I'll let you represent me for a month, see how far you can get me, see how far you can take me. Like, let's see how we get on. And if I'm happy with you after a month, then we'll sign something." But yeah, like, in terms of like, if you're just an influencer on your own, it's going to be a trial and error process, because if you've got no one to advise you, you're going to just learn things. You're going to make mistakes along the way. You know, it's not going to be the end of the world, just as long as you don't sign your life away for, you know, for no money.
Yeah, for very little.
And exclusivity is a big one, actually. One thing I didn't mention before is exclusivity for contracts. That's one of the first things that we look at as well, to be honest with you, to make sure that we're not, for the sake of, you know, a pittance, excluding yourself from doing deals with different sectors or different brands within a sector that you might be able to get away with. The worst thing in the world is, like, you know, fortunately I've not had it, but there's been a few times where an agent might ring me up panicked and go, you know, "Can we do this deal with this person?" You think, "Well, let me go check the contract you gave me 6 months ago to make sure it's not going to cause an issue now and that you can go and earn 200 grand, because if you can't, I'm going to have to have an uncomfortable conversation with you." So those sorts of things are really important as well. And if I was a standalone creative, that's probably one thing I'd always look out for as well.
Yeah, that exclusivity point, because I mean, you're basically shrinking your income at that point, I imagine, because you're saying, "This is the only person I'm tying myself to." That's a very, it's a very, very big point. So coming towards the end of the podcast, and I've got a few like football related questions now.
Right. Okay.
And it's something that I noticed in your LinkedIn profile, actually, and it's about the point of image rights. And something that I saw recently as well was that, I don't know quite how long ago this was, but it came into my awareness recently about Zlatan claiming that FIFA were using his likeness in games without consent. So my question is, because it's something that I've heard a lot more about over the years, and I guess maybe this becomes more murky because of how technology and the internet and social media has advanced. What actually what does image rights for a player in the Premier League, for example, actually entail? What things do you have to consider? Just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, image rights are anything that has, you know, anything that has a commercial value. So, you know, Joe Bloggs, who's playing for, you know, Vanarama National League team, would struggle to justify that his name, his image, his face, his likeness, his signature, these sort of elements of a bundle of rights, which people call image rights, have commercial value. Zlatan, on the other hand, dead easy, because everyone's trying to throw money at him to endorse their cars, watches, clothing, whatever it is. So the easiest way to think about image rights is, has this person got a bundle of rights that have a commercial value to a brand? Have they got a well-known face? Have they got, a recognizable image? Have they got a recognizable name? Are they of high profile? That's that's the easiest way to sort of conceptualize, what image rights are. And then obviously, because you have image rights associated with you and you've got commercial value, then clubs will pay a portion of what they pay you to your image rights company, because you're no longer just a footballer, you're a brand as well that's becoming part of their brand and helping them as a club promote their commercial partners by, wearing the shirt and by endorsing, whatever products that the commercial partners of the club have got. So that's the easiest way to sort of conceptualize it.
Yeah, that's quite, I just find it like quite an interesting area, because I guess at that point you can pretty much, like you said, you put a price on, this is how much my name, my face, everything I do is worth, and negotiate that within the contracts. And just coming on to that point as well, because I know it's something that's generally included in the contracts with the clubs, right? So how does that work when you also consider what those players are doing outside themselves as well? Are there
that's where it's really difficult. Yeah, that's where it's really difficult, because that's where the lawyers really come into their own, because they're carving out the elements that maybe the player wants to keep separate from the club. So Zlatan's actually probably a good example. We don't act as Zlatan, but it's pretty obvious to everybody who his commercial partners were before he joined United. And I think at the time, United's vehicle partner was Chevrolet, but Zlatan had a personal endorsement with Volvo. So obviously that's like a conflict straight away. So Zlatan joining United will want to make sure that he's not walking himself into a contractual claim from Volvo because he's suddenly promoting Chevrolet cars. So when the lawyers sit down to all the contracts, they literally have to go through and carve out anything that's pre-existing to make sure it's not going to cause a problem with the club sort of moving forward. And the bigger the player is when he moves and the more endorsements he's got, the more donkey work that has to be done in terms of separating everything out. And it's not a straightforward exercise. Some clubs possibly justifiably say that, well, actually you're joining, a huge recognizable football club, maybe one of the biggest clubs in world football. Your commercial deals on a personal basis are going to go through the roof now, because when you sign for Man United, for example, you'll get an extra 20 million followers. I'm not saying it's always the case, but you'll get a huge increase in your following, which makes you more attractive to brands to work with anyway. So you're going to make more money by joining us. So we want a percentage of whatever that is for the fact we're signing you. So there's loads of considerations that go into, when a player signs for a club and, how the money's all divvied up and worked out. But image rights is a massive part, especially the high level, sort of high profile names and signings is a massive part of it. Not least because it's a efficient way for the players to earn the money, but also because it's a justifiable way as well. These brands are throwing huge amounts of money at the football clubs to get close to some of the stars of first team football. So it only makes sense that those stars who are then taking time out of their training commitments to help the club promote the partners get paid accordingly.
I'm guessing as well that's why a lot of transfers can take a long time to get over the line, because it's things like this in this area that are, that the lawyers are still trying to make it work contractually, which is taking a long time for the club to finally announce we have signed blah blah player. No, 100%. And sometimes as well, the agents generally are very good at doing the plain contract thing themselves. Like they've seen enough of them, they know they want to put the money in, they want to make sure they're getting paid this and this. Like they're very good at that side of things themselves.
very rarely, I think, do they really need like expert legal advice on the playing contract. The predominance of the legal work is usually done around, a little bit maybe around the representation contracts, but predominantly around the image rights contracts when a transfer is taking place, because that's the area that's fraught with danger. And I don't think people approach it so much as a bit of like a power grab. It's not so much that, it's more everybody wants to make sure they're all singing off the same hymn sheet when the deal's done and the club go away and they start working with their commercial partners and the player's agent goes away and he starts sourcing commercial deals. They just want to make sure that the two don't meet for whatever reason, and they don't end up falling out, which I think is perfectly sensible and is exactly what should be done. But like you say, sometimes it takes a bit of time to iron out all those details.
Yeah, definitely. I even remember seeing something a few years ago actually with Mourinho when he was going to United, and apparently Chelsea owned his name, so they couldn't.
Something like that. So yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah, they owned the trademark Jose Mourinho, and I was just like, how can someone else own your name? That's mad to me.
I know.
That's just
crackers,
mad,
isn't it? I know.
That's mad.
It is crackers. But yeah, that's a good example of like how, what from the outside looking in, you might think, oh, he's United manager now. And I think he hadn't even been at Chelsea, had he? He'd been out of a job for a while before he went to United, I think. So it wasn't like United was snatching him out of Chelsea and putting him in the dugout at Old Trafford. But yeah, that's a good example of just like how these little nuanced sort of things can just sometimes be a bit of an obstacle to get things done. But image rights is a huge area of law, and it can be extremely complicated, and it's quite interesting to see how it all works. But it's just a part of like the transfer, if you like.
Yeah, that's I'm guessing that's probably an area of your work that keeps you up doing that thing with your eyes, right?
A little bit. I mean, my like I said, my boss has been doing these sorts of deals for a long time, and he sort of knows his way around them like the back of his hand. And it's like with anything, it's the more you do it, the more you see how they all work, the easier they get to. You can get to grips with them, and you know what to look for straight away. You know where to look for the carve outs and stuff. But yeah, it's just the biggest thing really is it's because of the level at which they're operating and the amount of money that's at stake. You really can't afford to get it wrong, because you could potentially be costing your client a lot of money in endorsement income if you end up not carving things out properly. So it's very much one of those things that you read and then read again and read again until you're blue in the face of it.
Would you say there's added pressure then, like when working with people at this level, whether it's the athletes or social media influencers? Do you feel like an increased level of pressure then?
Not really, no, not really. I don't feel it's increased pressure. I feel it's more just, for me personally, the biggest pressure that I feel on a day-to-day is just managing, like juggling so many different plates. So like I might have even at the moment, I've got like 6 or 7 pieces of litigation on all at different stages. So, I'll have some where we're like maybe preparing witness statements. I'll have some where we're literally just sending letters back and forth. And you've almost got to know at any moment that if a client rings you up, you've got to almost go to that file in your head and know exactly where everything's up to and what have you. And then at the same time as that, I have like 20 or 30 contracts on, all at different stages, all for different amounts of money, all for different people as well, who, to them a £10,000 endorsement deal might be a huge sum of money. To others, it might be just another, day's work for them. They just want to get it over and done with as fast as possible. So I don't feel pressure in the sense of, dealing with people at a high level, because they're just people at the end of the day who've just been very successful, and they're fortunately, the nice people to deal with, to be honest with you. There's no one that I deal with who's a client or that I've come across who's been difficult or anything, to be honest with you. Quite fortunate in that respect. But the biggest thing really is just managing time, to be honest with you. And that's the toughest part. That's the bit that causes the pressure, and not so much the sleepless nights, but you'll wake up early hours and that'll get you up and get you out to get on with things, to be honest.
That sounds Sounds like a very enthralling place to be,
Full
man.
on, man. Full on.
Yeah. And coming on to my last question, bro. What's well, let me give it a bit more context, because obviously people hear, you know, the stories and the clients you work with and you know the industry, like the type of people you're working with. But when you ask people this type of question, you know, sometimes you could be surprised. So, what's been your favorite experience of working at Fletcher Sports Law? Would you say, like, given everything that you're involved in, what would you say you can look back and think, wow, that was a real moment?
There's been a few, to be fair, but there's been a couple. The one that jumps to mind straight was the first case that went all the way to trial that we won, and we won like every single penny for the client, and the client had put his house up as collateral in case he lost as well, basically.
Jesus.
So, you know, he was an ex-player who'd done, obviously had a good career, but he'd done an agency deal for a transfer of a player, and then the club had sort of reneged on the payment, and it was quite a lot of money. When we won that, that was a massive, like, because although like not every case we do will go to trial, some will settle along the way because the cost of going is sometimes so prohibitive that it makes sense to not take the chance of going all the way. But in this instance, like, we were so sure they had such a good case, and they weren't putting forward any sort of offers to sort of settle it, that they didn't, you know, we didn't get any decent offers to settle the case. We ended up to run it all the way. So that was a big one, and that was a proper sort of, you know, fist pumping moment once we got the judgment through and you realise you won that. That was pretty good. And then the first time I went to St George's Park, that was not so much a pinch me moment, but it was basically me and my boss, and then just the England squad in a room for like an hour and a half, like just all me and my boss at a table at the front in a room that was probably no bigger than, like, I don't know, 20 by 30 feet, if that. It was really not a big room. And then just the entirety of the 25-man squad just staring back at us. That was mad. Because, and in some ways that was mad, but at the same time it was quite sad as well, because, you know, if I was a kid and like watching the 2006 like England team sort of era, where it was like Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes, Beckham, Rooney, Owen, like all these players in the prime, like Ferdinand, Terry, like these, the names would go on and on. If I bumped into any of them, it'd be like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And that sensation of like your childhood, which everyone's had it, I think, where they've met a footballer when they were a kid or whatever. It was over so quickly. It's like by the time it entered my mind, you know, like a chiropractor cracks your neck and you think, oh my god, shit, it's gonna hurt, and then before you know it, the pain's been and gone. It's exactly the same sensation meeting these players, because you realise they're just perfectly like normal people who are just very good at football, like very good at football, and that's it. And they're just normal guys, and that was a crazy moment, because it was like 4 years ago. I was like scratching around trying to beg people to give me a job, and now we're in this scenario here. But yeah, it was like a bit of a sad one at the same time, because I sort of realised that actually there's going to be very few people I'm going to meet in business now or in work that I'm going to have a proper sort of like, oh my god, starstruck moment.
Yeah, because that's
unless it was like a Ronaldo or a Messi, I think I'd be like, wow, this is quite cool. But other than that, I don't know if I'd have that childish sort of buzz anymore.
Yeah.
Is what it is, I suppose.
That moment completely drained the fanboy out of you. Like,
literally,
it's done now. It's done.
It did. It really did. And you know, we'd met loads. You know, I'd met quite a few players before, like through work and stuff, and sat with them in rooms for hours and hours going over stuff and what have you. And yeah, it was just one of those things. But that was a really cool moment. To be fair, it was a really cool moment.
That's
it's not like that every day, I would add.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's behind a computer or on the phone. But occasionally there's like good days like that. And you know, again, that's, you know, you're probably thinking blowing smoke up his bum, but that is down to my boss more than anything. Like, he literally threw me a bone when no one else would, and give me the freedom to try and crack on and do things. So and that gave rise to those opportunities. So
just a little disclaimer for anyone listening, don't just start throwing out applications to Fletcher Sports Law thinking
Yeah.
you're
No,
just going to be chilling with the England team all day.
no. I
uh,
mean, yeah, I think
yeah,
if you apply for jobs, no matter what you do, that ultimately there'll be little perks like that in whatever field that you do. Where it might not be necessarily like meeting the England team, but it might be something else that's completely like out there that you won't get to do in any other field.
yeah,
And I think you just got to cling on to those little perks and put them in your cap, really.
definitely. Tom, thanks so much, man. This has been
No worries, pal.
it's been a
Anytime.
pleasure having you on and just hearing about things from your perspective. And like, I feel like I've learned a lot and I could chat for hours longer, like going deeper into the football things. Maybe probably a lot of the things I'd ask might be better off the
Yeah,
airwaves.
100%.
But no, I feel like a lot of people can take value from it, especially when looking at contracts or just being aware of building out if they want to make being a creative part of their main source of income, that it's important that they invest in themselves and get the right people on board for those professional services. And just hearing about some of the experiences you've had, even just you put in a lot of work to get where you are, and then even when you were there, you kind of created that lane with I guess the Love Island contestants. So yeah, it's been really interesting hearing that story, man. And just to
You're
give
welcome, mate.
you some room to plug yourself, you can put your socials there, you can say your social media, you can put your company on the map. Just tell
Yeah,
people where
sure.
to find you and the practice.
Yeah, so I mean, no plug intended, really. But if anybody, what I would say is, if anybody's thinking of getting in or is remotely interested in anything that I've said in the last hour or so, then by all means reach out, because I'm genuinely a big believer of like trying to help people up the ladder a little bit and making sure the door doesn't like close behind me. Because like I said, there's a lot of people that gave me their time and they didn't necessarily have to. So I also hate the thought that like, I didn't have, my mum and dad didn't go to university. I didn't really have anybody in the legal profession as like family members to say, well, how do I do this? Like, so I had to sort of try and work out as I've gone along. So
Yeah.
I do, if there's anybody else in that similar sort of situation, then by all means, reach out. You can tag me in whatever, in the video or on LinkedIn or whatever. And, that's what I've promised to myself. I always try and get back to people and stuff, try and help out where I can. So that would be my plug, to be honest with you. I'm busy enough with other people asking for legal work at the minute, so I'm trying to swerve doing any more work. But
yeah,
that's what I'd say, man. Like, if anybody else just wants to like help try and get into the industry or like work experience and stuff, we'll always do our best to try and fit people in.
Brilliant. You heard it here first, guys. Thank you so much for being on, Tom.
No worries, bro.
For everyone listening. Good to see you too, man. It's been too long. For everyone listening, thanks for jumping on again, and I'll catch you on the next podcast. Goodbye.